Just over 1 year ago, Richard Allen was found guilty of the Delphi murders and sentenced to 130 years in prison. For many, it felt like the end of a long, painful chapter. But this week, everything we thought we knew has been turned completely upside down. Allen's legal team has just dropped a bombshell, a 113-page appeal that doesn't just claim he's innocent, but that the state of Indiana tortured him until he confessed. This isn't just about a legal technicality. This is an accusation that the very system designed to deliver justice may have created a false reality to secure a conviction. Let's start with the most shocking part of this new filing, Richard Allen's confessions. We've all heard the reports. He confessed to the murders of Abby Williams and Libby German. Not once, not twice, but an astounding 61 times. To the prosecution, this was the nail in the coffin, irrefutable proof of his guilt. The case seemed closed. But his lawyers are now presenting a terrifying alternative narrative. They argue that these weren't confessions at all. They were the desperate, delusional ramblings of a man whose mind had been broken by the state. According to the appeal, Allen was subjected to extreme and prolonged solitary confinement, conditions so severe that he developed something called solitary-induced psychosis. The details are deeply disturbing. He was allegedly held in a small, windowless cell, 24 hours a day. The lights were always on. He had almost no human contact. The court documents describe a man in a complete mental spiral. He was reportedly eating his own feces and drinking his own urine. He was banging his head against the walls so violently that he had to be restrained. He was observed talking to himself, screaming, and showing signs of severe psychological distress. His own attorneys claim he became legally gravely disabled, unable to care for himself or even assist in his own defense. Now here is the critical part that his lawyers are focusing on. They claim the jury never heard the full, horrifying extent of his mental deterioration. They were told he confessed, but they weren't told about the context. They didn't hear about the psychosis, the self-harm, or the disturbing behaviors that his lawyers say were a direct result of his confinement. The appeal essentially asks a chilling question. Did the state of Indiana intentionally break Richard Allen's mind to get the confessions they needed to close this high-profile case? Were these the words of a guilty man, or the ravings of someone driven to insanity by his conditions? The appeal argues that holding a man in these conditions and then using his subsequent confessions against him is a form of coercion, or, as they put it, a form of torture. It raises fundamental questions about our justice system. At what point does incarceration become a tool for psychological manipulation? If someone is mentally incapacitated, can anything they say be trusted as a true confession? This is the central pillar of their argument for a new trial. They believe that if the jury had known the full story behind the 61 confessions, the verdict could have been entirely different. They see it not as evidence of guilt, but as evidence of systemic abuse. But the appeal doesn't stop there. It digs back into another major point of contention from the original trial, the Odinism theory. You might remember that Allen's defense team wanted to present an alternate theory of the crime. They claimed that the murders were not the act of a lone individual, but a ritualistic sacrifice carried out by a group of men involved in a pagan Norse religion known as Odinism. They had evidence they wanted to present, including claims of other potential suspects and details from the crime scene that they believed pointed to a ritual. However, Judge Fran Gull, who presided over the case, completely shut this down. She blocked the defense from presenting any of their Odinism-related evidence or arguments to the jury. The jury never heard about the other potential suspects. They never heard the defense's full explanation for why they believed Allen was just a scapegoat. The new appeal argues that this decision was a catastrophic error that denied Richard Allen his constitutional right to a fair trial. A defendant has the right to present a complete defense, and by silencing their alternate theory, the judge essentially left them with no way to counter the prosecution's narrative. They were fighting with one hand tied behind their back. The appeal doubles down, arguing that the jury was only ever shown one side of the story. They were presented with Richard Allen as the sole perpetrator, his confessions as the ultimate proof, and they were never allowed to even consider the possibility that someone else, or a group of people, could have been responsible. The defense team is adamant that if they had been allowed to present their evidence, it would have created more than enough reasonable doubt in the minds of the jurors. And there's another layer to this. The appeal also makes serious allegations against the investigators themselves. It suggests that key detectives in the case may have misled Judge Gull to obtain the original search warrants for Richard Allen's home. This is a very serious charge. If it's true that law enforcement provided false or misleading information to a judge, then the evidence collected under those warrants could be thrown out. This is known as the fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine in law. If the initial search was illegal, then everything that came from it, any evidence found in his house, any subsequent statements he made, could be deemed inadmissible in court. This accusation attacks the very foundation of the state's case against Allen. It suggests that the investigation was flawed from the very beginning. If the defense can prove that detectives were dishonest in their affidavits, it could unravel the entire prosecution. It wouldn't just be about whether Allen had a fair trial. It would call into question the integrity of the entire investigation. The appeal is essentially claiming a conspiracy of sorts, where information was hidden, manipulated, and misrepresented at every turn to ensure a conviction. So where does this leave us now? Richard Allen is currently being held in a maximum security prison. His lawyers have fired their shot, and now it's up to the Indiana Court of Appeals to decide what happens next. They will review the 113-page document and all the arguments within it. They have a few options. They could dismiss the appeal, affirming the original verdict and keeping Allen in prison for life. Or, if they find merit in these powerful new arguments, they could do something drastic. If the appellate court agrees that Allen's confessions were coerced through torture, or that he was denied the right to present a defense, or that the investigation was built on deceit, they could overturn his conviction. This would mean that Richard Allen could be granted a brand new trial. A new trial where the jury would hear everything. The full story of his mental collapse in solitary confinement, the defense's alternate theory about a ritualistic killing, and the allegations of police misconduct. It would be a legal earthquake, reopening one of the most followed true crime cases in recent memory. This case has always been filled with twists and turns, but this latest development is perhaps the most significant yet. It forces us to look beyond the simple narrative of a killer and his confessions, and to question the very process that led to his conviction. Was justice truly served for Abby and Libby? Or was an innocent, mentally ill man sacrificed to close a case that had haunted the nation for years? The answer to that question now rests in the hands of the appellate court. This is a really complex and emotional situation, and I'm curious to know what you all think. After hearing about these new claims, where do you stand? Do you believe Richard Allen's 61 confessions are undeniable proof of his guilt, regardless of his mental state? Or do you think the claims of torture and solitary-induced psychosis are compelling enough to suggest he was coerced into a false confession? Was it fair for the judge to block the defense's alternate theory from the jury? Let me know your verdict in the comments below. I'll be reading through them and responding. Thank you so much for watching and for engaging in this important conversation. If you want to stay updated on the Delphi case and other true crime stories, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. Your support means the world. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video.